Dear everyone, welcome to today's webinar on decoding Taiwan's 2024 election, Voices from Taiwan. And I have three absolutely amazing speakers. Kuei-bo Huang, who is the professor of National Chengchi University. And I've also been the Deputy Secretary General of Kuomintang from 2021 to 2022. Ju Jianguo, who is the professor at National Sun Yat-sen University and vice president of the Institute for National Policy Research, and Chung-Min Tsai, who is professor at National Chengchi University and the Taipei School of Economy and Political Science. And you can find their full CVs online. And I think it's important to look at this because the election in Taiwan has been the most followed election ever regarding Taiwan. And I think the interest in Europe has never been so high. What's going to happen? And there are many, many good reasons for that. Taiwan is becoming a much more prominent economic actor in Europe. We see Taiwan's relevance in international affairs, not least in semiconductor businesses. So Taiwan is becoming a much more prominent actor in Europe. But the election, of course, also brings in some interesting results. The DPP secured 51 seats, lost the majority. It won the presidency. And we have the two other opposition parties, which is TPP and Kuomintang, KMT, who actually increased but didn't receive a majority either. And so, of course, this constellation brings some interesting results. There's going to be a lot of compromises to be made, or maybe not, when I'm listening into the speakers there. But I think it also is extremely relevant for the international community what happens, not least when it comes to China. China, of course, and Beijing, and the leadership in Beijing has increased the pressure on Taiwan rather significantly the last decade or so. And this has been causing a lot of concerns. And of course, an election like this raises a number of issues for Taiwan. But I hope that the speakers will be able to give us some insights in this. And each of the speakers will have 7 minutes to present their views, and then I will open up for discussion. And I should also mention Professor Kuei-bo Huang will leave 10 minutes early, so I will let him start, and we will take it from there. So Kuei-bo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and my dear colleagues from Taiwan. Glad to be here because I think it's of great importance to exchange ideas about what's going to happen or what has happened after January 13th major elections. I cannot forecast too long because, what we're going to discuss later has to hinge largely on the result of the US presidential election in this coming November. Therefore, I try to look at what is going to happen within probably the coming 6 or 8 months in order to give you a rough picture of what I think in the Taiwan Strait. Basically, I think the first possible trend that is going to take place in the Taiwan Strait is more and more uncertainties. More and more uncertainties. These uncertainties result mainly from two colliding forces, one on Taiwan, another on the mainland. One of the forces on Taiwan refers to the strong will of the President-elect William Lai, who claimed himself as a practical worker for Taiwan independence. Of course, during the campaign, he tried to explain the meaning of being practical, but he never gives up the word worker for Taiwan independence. So I think his strong will is going to show something that would worry parties involved in the Taiwan Strait, especially Beijing and Washington. I'm not saying that William Lai is going to push Taiwan independence after he takes office in May 2024, but I think his tendency, his inclination towards Taiwan independence would worry quite a few people. So this is the force on Taiwan. And the force on the mainland is, of course, Xi Jinping, the top leader in Beijing. Xi Jinping has had his Chinese dream, especially under the great rejuvenation of the Chinese people with the national unification. So the unification with Taiwan would become one of the core pillars for Xi Jinping's Chinese dream. Not to mention, Xi Jinping, according to a lot of people, is also a man of strong will. So you can see a man of strong will in Taipei and another man of strong will in Beijing. So this is what I call the colliding forces, that will lead to greater uncertainty in the near future. And another trend I would like to stress is the emerging technical co-management of the Taiwan Strait between Washington and Beijing. I call it technical co-management because neither side would recognize, yes, we are talking about that and we are coordinating something in order to, ensure peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Neither side is going to say that, but technically they discuss it. They probably plan on it through a lot of so-called guardrail national security dialogues or channels between officials from Beijing and Washington. So I think this could be an emerging trend in the near future, especially when it comes to the time when William Lai is going to take office, because neither Washington nor Beijing would sustain such a loss or challenges resulting from instability in the Taiwan Strait. And so that being said, I'm not that pessimistic, but I'm not optimistic either. I think there might be a way to control the rising risks in the Taiwan Strait. That is using the GRIT, gradual reduction in tension, in order to bring greater stability in the Taiwan Strait. This gradual reduction in tension needs some moves, maybe unilateral moves by either Taipei or Beijing, or it's a simultaneous or coordinated move by both sides in the Taiwan Strait. I don't know which could be more possible, but I think quite a few Americans, especially those in Washington, would hope that on the Taipei side, Taipei could consider at least hiding the DPP's clause for Taiwan independence. And on the Beijing side, they urge Beijing to not threaten use of force against Taiwan. So if either way or both ways can be done, then I think the goal of GRIT could be achieved, at least for the short run. And at least before I end my introductory commentary, I think it takes two to tango. So the worsening of cross-strait relations actually began when Tsai Ing-wen took office in May 2016, because Tsai Ing-wen withdrew from the political foundation for cross-Taiwan Strait dialogue. That is, according to former President Mai's the 1992 consensus, serving as a foundation for cross-strait communication and cooperation. So Tsai Ing-wen withdrew from that foundation, followed by Xi Jinping's reinforcement of threatened use of force against Taiwan. So it takes two to tango. And then we see the downwards turning of cross-Taiwan Strait relations till today. So I think I can stop here for your more questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Quebo. Enlightening as always. And now we have Jujian. Do you want to take 7 minutes to enlighten us a bit? Thank you.
Thank you again for the kind invitation. I only got 7 minutes, but lots of questions from you. So I will just touch on important points. Number one, I believe regardless is Hoyoi or Lai Ching-te won the election on 13th of January, China will pretty much do the same thing to Taiwan, i.e. giving more pressure to Taiwan. And number two, it is actually the bigger global security environment forcing the US and China to sit down and manage their relations on November 15th last year. Bad situations, including what's going on at Europe and also between Israel and Hamas, Iran versus Pakistan. So if you put all this together, it is actually the very bad situation surrounding, forcing China and the States to sit down and manage their relations, which also in turn bear huge impact to the situation of Taiwan Strait. That's number two. And number three is it is actually not accepting 92 consensus or not. I have to say that accepting 92 consensus as the foundation for the interaction of cross-strait is not just naive, it is also dangerous, because Xi Jinping in 2016 and Xi Jinping today, it is not the same leader anymore. If you look at how Xi Jinping, starting all the way from 18th Party Congress to 19th Party Congress, and all the way to October 16th, 2022, the 20th Party Congress, Chinese Communist Party is no more collective leadership anymore. It's a one-man party. If you look at the standing committee, and Xi Jinping is getting more and more impatient. If you look at his political report in year 2022, and if you look at his statements when he had a summit meeting with President Biden, November 15th last year. Accepting 92 consensus is not a period. It has the followings. China will then demand for peace negotiation, for peace agreement. China will then asking for political consultation and to the ultimate goal of unification talk. So accepting 92 consensus is not just naive, it's also dangerous. And number four, again, regardless is Lai Ching-te or Hoyoi won the election 13th of January, these coming years, starting from this year, 2024 to 2027, are going to be very difficult for everyone, including for China and Taiwan. 2024 to 2027 is a high for the US government to deliver arms to Taiwan, including 66 units of F-16, including M1A2 tanks, including HIMARS, including Harpoon missiles. And 2027 is gonna be the most difficult year because coincidentally, we are going to have presidential election again, and it's gonna be 21st Party Congress for CCP as well. And the US is just like this year, is running their presidential election as well. So coincidentally, 2027 is gonna be difficult for everyone. And number four, I'm basically presenting based on your questions. We just sum up the first round of Trip 4 working level meetings last year. And I believe after Lai Ching-te takes office in this May, Taiwan will push further, especially seeking more cooperation in terms of semiconductor industry with Japan and the United States. And number 5, regarding this global supply chain, I think the U.S. This coming U.S. presidential election and the possible Trump might return is the biggest uncertainty to this global supply chain. And number 6 is on Taiwan-Japan relations. I have to say that it is not really up to Taiwan today in terms of Taiwan-Japan relations. As you know, Kishida Captain is having a very difficult time right now, and I believe after the pass of the budgeting in March, after April, we will see the political development of Japanese politics will be more clear. And in terms of China-Japan relations, I would have to say that it's not looking good since Xi Jinping would put Dong Jun to defense minister and promote Hu Zhongming as the new naval commander. If you look at Hu Zhongming's portfolio, he's more hawkish than hawkish general. He already put on a show with the Philippines last month. And Hu Zhongming is right now putting on new shows on East China Sea against Japan. And Hu Zhongming will put on new shows surrounding Taiwan, especially at Taiwan Strait in the coming months. And number 9, for your questions on our Congress, I believe there will be flexible cooperation between DPP and TPP because Kowenza is a politician too flexible to have principles or manners. And I believe Kowenza will want to cooperate with DPP case by case to maximize its political interest. And number 10, based on the policy platforms during the campaign from KMT and TPP, those two parties do have disputes to the current ruling party or the current government on energy policy, housing policy on younger generation, trade policy, and foreign policy. But all these 3 parties do have consensus on enhancing, beefing up Taiwan's national defense. And lastly, on the possibility for Lai to have communication with Beijing, I do not think so. But some flexible or under-table kind of communication channel might be established. It was so during Tsai Ing-wen administration. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yu-Chen. And it's a very interesting discussion. And I think we have reason to come back to some of the points there. Chungmin, I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. It's not really a good idea to talk after these 2 great scholars sharing their insightful views, especially Professor Guo has elaborated almost all questions. So I would like to share my 2 cents on a few questions, probably not that comprehensive, but hopefully offering you more different views. I tried to give you some ideas from what I observed in China. I went there for 2 weeks and just got back. And of course, the Chinese people and scholars, they are very concerned with the cross-strait relations as well, like us. I found something interesting is, although we really want to know or worry what if Beijing would do anything violently in the coming years. But the question for themselves is Taiwan still on the top of the list? Of course, politically, but probably everyone knows that the economy in China is suffering. So, launching a word is not an easy task. Say, okay, let's go for that. Then they will just do it. It really needs a lot of logistics and money and a lot of things looking at Ukraine. So my finding in China on their economy is they are now suffering from the leaving foreign direct investment, which means the foreign direct investment is lowering, and they just make several official announcements, try to get these foreign investors back in China. And also, most of you may find that nowadays, if you travel around abroad, you didn't really see a lot of Chinese tourists, and many Chinese brands, foreign luxury brands, they left China. So for Beijing, the most important task now is to tackle with the economic downturn. So again, this background, I wouldn't say if even they want, I wouldn't say they are able to do anything militarily toward Taiwan in the coming few years. So verbally or rhetorically, I think they will keep saying that, but economically or in reality, I really doubt if they can do this. So following on this line of thinking, I would say for China, the first job for them is to manage the US-China relations. And the cross-strait relations is always in the shadow of US-China relations. So if China wants to get the US-China relations improved, so of course, they could still keep saying tough words toward Taiwan, but I don't think they will really do anything, take any actions. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is quite interesting. When I talk to my Chinese friend, they say this time before the election, the Chinese authority, they didn't really discuss too much, which means for the ordinary Chinese people, they didn't really learn a lot even from their official channels about Taiwan's election. They simply just didn't say it. So for them, for the Chinese society, this time they got very little information about the election, not even promoting either side or downgrade either side. They just simply didn't say anything, which was very different from previous elections, because in the past, the Chinese government always say a lot, criticize Taiwan before the election in China. I mean, not to Taiwanese, but to their own people. But this time, for those Chinese people, my friends, and the people even in the taxi, they didn't really learn a lot from their official channel. I found this is very interesting. So when they saw me, they really wanted to know what happened in Taiwan. And that's my 2 cents on cross-strait relations. And I would like also to share some observation over the industrial policies, and especially with a focus on semiconductor industry. Although the US is now putting the sanction over the semiconductor industry export to China, and also make the Chip 4 Alliance and try to convince their like-minded countries to join them to sanction China. But one interesting news just a few days ago was that the CEO of NVIDIA, Jason Huang, he went to China. He visited the NVIDIA offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and there's a very interesting picture showing that he just very, happily celebrating their year-end party. So for those industry people, I think because China is still a robust market, so when you're developing these high-end products, but actually China, the Chinese domestic market is still there, where their benefit from. So how to sanction China while keeping profitable? I think this is very challenging. So under this idea, we don't really see like TSMC or NVIDIA or these big companies. They are very willing to work with American government sanction. Well, I don't mean this company they will go against, but they're still trying to figure out how to survive without developing the high-end products in China or sell their equipment to China, but keep their own company profitable. The related idea is whenever you develop high-end products, or if you do invest more in R&D, you actually just want to make better products and earning better market share. So obviously, China is still playing a very key role in the consumption side. So that does not mean China could really develop. I don't think so. According to my observation, I don't think China could really develop rapidly under this pressure. Some people argue in the coming few years, if you put the sanction too tough, they will develop by themselves. I personally don't see, and I didn't observe this according to my conversation with the Chinese scholars. But the key is, if you're putting a sanction over them, you're actually losing the market and you're losing the profit. So how to invest a large amount of money in R&D and you really produce some high-end things, but you don't have any place to sell. So I think nowadays in the political economy, this is the idea of the spider network, which means when this global supply chain has been developed like a spider net, so that means everyone was connected closely with each other. So now if you really want to get rid of China without fill in other role, parallel player, then that will be difficult for the industry. Well, of course, the industry thing, they may not think like the government, but that's something the government should pay attention to. So I will just stop here.
Well, thank you very much. And to the audience, if you want questions, just post them in Q&A and I'll try to incorporate them in my questions. And actually, the supply chain, of course, is really interesting because not only for Taiwan, but also for Europe, the Taiwan Straits is a central transit route for us. Not least also Taiwan with its trade with Europe and its semiconductor business. So what about the security of the supply chain? Is that, well, first of all, is it secure? Can we do it? Can we expect adjustments from the United States and China? And then General Chun In-bun, he just asked the questions, it's that, is it possible for China to conduct a blockade? So, I mean, if you can sort of try to jump in a bit deeper into this, because as for the world economy, the Taiwan now is a key hub. Let's be honest there. Kuei-bo, do you want to start? And we go Kuei-bo, Jie-jun, and Chung-min. Jie-jun.
Okay, let me have the first shoot because I have to leave earlier.
That's what I was thinking.
For the semiconductor, yeah. So I try to type in my answer, as my contribution. Okay. So as for the semiconductor, I think, in terms of Taiwan's technology leading the world, I think Taiwan will be safe for the following few years. But based on some analysts' observations and predictions, then when the next generation's chips are coming out, and if Taiwan cannot hold a very secure supply chain, not only with America, but also with some other potential big suppliers, probably in Europe, then I think Taiwan's leading position in this semiconductor business will be relatively diminished. However, if Taiwan, because Taiwan has held a very unique position, because in terms of the supply chain, from the upstream to downstream, Taiwan got them all. So if Taiwan can maintain this advantage, moving towards the next stage of chip industry or chip business, then I think I don't know, but I think Taiwan probably can hold for a few more years. But then I really have no clue. And as for the possible blockade of the mainland Chinese troops, of course, you have seen that after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taipei. All these exercise led to the fact that the PLA is thinking about using force to block Taiwan. Not to mention, some of the infrastructure in Taiwan has been very fragile, including the deposit of natural gas. I think the strategic deposit of natural gas in Taiwan can sustain for, according to the government, 11 or 12 days. So what about after 11 or 12 days? So this blockade could be effective if Taiwan cannot prepare itself well for this potential blockade by the PLA. But Taiwan is not Ukraine. Ukraine could get some supplies from these European countries. But it will be difficult for mainland to blockade Taiwan. But if mainland really blockades Taiwan, then Taiwan will have difficult time gaining, timely and important supplies or logistics from other countries.
Yes, thank you very much. Jutian, you want to jump in?
Okay, for two questions. First, on the supply chain, I would like to give you some rough idea on the Taiwan semiconductor industry status. Number one, the U.S. intentionally formed this chip for reasons. The U.S. trying to establish an independent semiconductor supply chain away from disaster or from unease like wars. So the U.S. is in charge of IC design. Japan is in charge of material and equipment. Taiwan and South Korea, we are in charge of manufacturing. And number two is our government set up 5 colleges of semiconductors last year. All these 5 national universities will train more than 2,500 semiconductor engineers. And it is the biggest number, biggest troop of semiconductor engineers in the world in order to maintain Taiwan's cutting edge status in semiconductor industry. So all these are very simple numbers or information. And in addition to that, both TSMC, UMC, and other semiconductor companies will establish 16 advanced semiconductor factories at Taiwan, lower than 5 nanos. So all these 16 factories will again maintain Taiwan's leading position in semiconductor industry. And number two, on the blockade of Taiwan, again, I will give you some simple facts and numbers. First of all, there are more than 500,000 commercial vessels passing through the waters of Taiwan. More than 1.7 million aircrafts passing through the air of Taiwan. So do your math. How many vessels and aircrafts a day? And it requires that much military capacity of PLA in order to blockade Taiwan, which China doesn't have today, and China will not have that kind of military capacity in the coming 10 or 20 years. And number two is Taiwan's northeastern air and sea and eastern coast. It is the main area for US forces on Okinawa, including Futenma Base and Kadena Base, to exercise. So in order to blockade Taiwan, you have to sabotage all these 2 bases, which are the biggest overseas bases of the United States. And number 3 is whatever bad things happen to Taiwan, including blockade or invasion, it will naturally spill over to Okinawa Islands and also the Filipino Islands, because there is only 110 kilometers away from Yonaguni Island and only 142 kilometers away from Taiwan's south end to the Filipino Islands. So modern weapons, 110 kilometers only require 2 minutes. So any invasion to Taiwan or blockade to Taiwan will naturally spill over to Okinawa and the Philippines. It really doesn't matter if Beijing likes it or not. And number 4, blockade Taiwan equals blockading Japan and South Korea. 92% of Japan energy supply passing through the water of Taiwan. More than 80% of Korean energy supply passing through the water of Taiwan. So blockade Taiwan equals blockade Japan and South Korea. Number 5, any blockade of these international waters will naturally attract high concentration of military vessels from the countries surrounding this area, including the military vessels from Japan, South Korea, Australia, the US, even the Philippines, France, UK, Germany. So blockade Taiwan is really just saying, yeah, but what we are really worried about is soft blockade, not hard blockade. Because 2019, February 1st, China passed its new Coast Guard Act. And September 1st, they passed a new act for maritime transportation safety. All those 2 acts allowing Chinese Coast Guard to board and inspect suspicious vessels in the open waters. So Taiwan is really worried about is soft blockade, not really hard blockade type of accident. Thank you.
Chungmin?
Yeah, regarding the semiconductor industry, I fully agree with my 2 colleagues here that we are now leading in the whole industry, especially TSMC has over 60% of the market share in the high-end products. But the issue is when we are very good at making the chips, where to go. So that's why I emphasize the importance of Chinese. Well, that's not me, the industries, they emphasize the importance of Chinese domestic market. So I don't think China, as I said, I don't think China could catch up with either Taiwan or US or other countries, because since 2014, China has already intentionally invest a large amount of money in developing their chip industry. But unfortunately, they didn't really perform very successful. It's already a decade. So even before the US put a sanction over the China's semiconductor industry. So based on this, I don't think they would be able to catch up with just after feeling the pressure from the US. They simply failed to do so since many years ago. Well, they are catching up with, but very slowly, very slowly. So Taiwan and the US, we're enjoying this leading position, I'm pretty for sure, in the coming many years. But still, when we are making all these things, where to go, and there is where profit from. And the whole idea is you really need to sell things out to get profitable, to get profit, so that you earn money to reinvest in the research and development. So it's an ecosystem. You have the upstream, downstream, and everyone devoted to investing in research and design and making something new, making something more advanced. And toward the end, you really sold everything out to get them profit, and in order to invest more in R&D. So it's a cycle, and it's a virtuous cycle if everything goes smoothly. But now the problem is something wrong with part of this virtuous cycle and making it into a vicious cycle. So I think it's always fine to sanction China, but the issue for us, like-minded countries, including US, China, Japan, South Korea, is when we are developing this, of course, this high-end production are very important to the military weapons, but that's not everything. So it's part of that, but not 100%, which means when we're developing the high-end products, we still have to think about the profit. I mean, that's from the very industrial point of view. So how could government successfully convince the industry to stand with them? Of course, the government subsidies were very important. So that's why recently you see Japanese government, American government, they heavily subsidize TSMC factory in the US, in Kumamoto in Japan, and Arizona in the US. But in the long run, I think that's still a very challenging issue for both the government and the industries to face, how to coordinate with each other if they really want to take similar action toward China, against China. And the second issue about the blockade, I would like to provide another angle is, according to our government data, the capital flows and the human flows in the past few years, that's actually increasing. So which means also our political situation, relationship with China has been deteriorating in the past few years. But economically, the total amount of exchange interaction has not been really slowing down or decreasing. So I don't think that's possible if the Beijing really would like to blockade Taiwan, because that means not only militarily, but you really need to stop all the interactions and flows across the strait, including these Taiwanese businessmen living in China, but they have family in Taiwan, and their money, as I said, the Chinese economy is now in a very difficult situation. So they're welcoming not only the investment from the US, foreign countries, but also Taiwan. So Taiwanese investment for them is very important. So by blockading Taiwan means they really need to stop everything in order to pressure the Taiwanese government to take what Beijing proposed. So I don't think, objectively, I don't think it's viable for Beijing to do this, or even I don't think they could come up with any good plan to do this. So I just like to provide, some more political economy views for your reference.
Fantastic. We can have a whole discussion about this and supply chains. And I'm of the very strong opinion we need to have shorter supply chains and more among like-minded states. And shorter is not in distance, but fewer hubs to increase security. But that will, of course, cost. This is not cost-free, but that's a whole different discussion. But let's go a bit back into domestic issues. The DPPs, they lost seats in the Legislative Yuan. They don't have the majority anymore. They went from 61 to 53. How will this affect sort of the decision making? And I have two questions as well, because suddenly it looks like TPP is a kingmaker in a sense. Anyone who convinces TPP would have the majority. And Frida Lampinen was saying, she was referring to Eugen's comment here on DPP, and it says like, what is the reason that DPP would then collaborate with TPP collaborates with DPP or Kuomintang? What are the benefits long term? Can we actually see, is it better for TPP to be in opposition for the next election, or is it better to support the government? Why would it be more beneficial and not? And actually, and then we also, Benjamin Bolcher was asking a bit here about the Legislative Yuan. What are the powers of the Legislative Yuan? Can they block bills? Can they introduce major changes? So how important is it for DPP and the political parties to control the Legislative Yuan? And I think you can use almost children's language here, because the Legislative Yuan is an unknown territory for us outside Taiwan. So, Kuei-bo, let's have you start.
Okay. In the Legislative Yuan, actually the majority can be in the following three forms. One is, of course, DPP and TPP. They will be majority. And the second form will be TPP and KMT. They will be a majority as well. But a third form is KMT and DPP. That's a supermajority. So I don't know in the future what kind of majority will be seen when a bill is being discussed. But my hunch is that this coordination or cooperation among the three parties will hinge on a case-on-case basis. For example, in the case of the resumption of the oversight bill on the ECFA, Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, signed in 2010, perhaps if Ko Wen-je, the chairperson of TPP, has been serious, then I think TPP and KMT would work together to push through this oversight bill in order to facilitate the further progress of ECFA. But on some other issues, maybe in terms of ideology or in terms of future development of respective parties, maybe TPP and DPP are going to collaborate in order to either squeeze the KMT or to gain respective advantages over KMT. So I think, again, it will be very, very turbulent, chaotic in the LY. But, the DPP government, when Chen Shui-bian was present, has seen such a turbulence or chaos for 8 years. So I think, we expect turbulence, but Taiwan will still move on.
So thank you very much. Zhu Jian, can I have your insights on this?
I believe TPP will cooperate with KMT, especially on energy policy and housing, and the policies for younger generation, which those two opposition parties believe the current government has not been doing a good job, and especially on energy policy and housing policy. There are still some, room and consensus between TPP and DPP. So I believe TPP will maximize its own interest in creating its own political stars from all these policy areas. Since TPP didn't win any district seats at all, it's all proportional. So second of all, TPP will try to enlarge its nationwide reputation. So by no matter cooperating with KMT or DPP on energy policy, housing, and policies for younger generation, will gain more nationwide reputation for TPP as a party, targeting on proportional seats in the future. And I believe the most tricky one is defense budgeting. 2022 and 2023, our Congress passed special bill to allow our government to have 500 billion Taiwanese dollars for defense budget 2023 and 600 billion Taiwanese dollars for 2024, which is this year. So we also require that big amount of budgeting for further defense procurements from the United States. So I believe defense budgeting is the most tricky part for the new dynamics in the Congress. Thank you.
Zhu-min.
Okay. Let me give you some story about Taiwan's third party. none of our third parties survived the third election. New Party, People First Party, and Taiwan Consolidation Party, New Power Party. So none of them survived the third election. So now the TPP had performed quite well in their first and second election. So I think their challenging is the third one coming in 4 years. So for them, I would say the most important strategy to gain their momentum, to get more seats, both from PR system and district, especially as Professor Ko mentioned, TPP didn't get any district position this time. And it's quite similar to what New Power Party experienced 8 years ago, 4 years ago. So it doesn't really matter. I think this doesn't really matter for TPP whom they would like to work with. But the key is what they could gain from this cooperation, either with TPP or KMT. But of course, it seems that it's more difficult for them to work with TPP. But that's not 100% impossible if they could find any gain or any utility by adopting this strategy. So I would say in the coming 4 years, TPP will be a very interesting, but not exactly a critical minority. At this time, like tomorrow, we are going to have our new chair of the Legislative Yuan. And before that, DPP and KMT, they all tried to negotiate with TPP. And TPP was very much like a kingmaker and saying that, okay, we can talk, but toward the end, TPP have their own candidates running for election tomorrow. Of course, it's almost 100%. They will not be able to get it, but I think it shows quite clearly their attitude is, well, we are not necessarily working with anyone. And I would say behind the thing, that's because they really want to keep, if not increase their momentum for the election 4 years later. So I would say in a nutshell, whatever benefit then in the coming election in 4 years, they will go for that. So it's not neither working with KMT or nor with DPP will be their own policy.
So just a question, I think this is very enlightening. Something on the recognition part, we have 2 questions that falls into that. I mean, with an anonymous attendee said, with the free fall of diplomatic partners, what happened when no countries recognize ROC? Would that change the current status? What would Beijing do? And that ties into, I now disappeared there. Yu Fenchang's comment there, if Taiwan is not independent, wouldn't that make the whole world more concerned or worried? If Taiwan is not independent, then, the world's industrial chain must be evacuated from Taiwan, just like it's happening in China. But so the whole status of Taiwan, what does it mean? What are the concerns we should look up for? And what should we look up for in this one? And of course, Taiwan's international space is a big thing here, which doesn't necessarily mean recognition as a state. It can mean so much more. So if you can elaborate a bit on that. Professor Ko, you want to start?
I don't really believe China will cut all these diplomatic ties of Taiwan. But if Beijing really do that, it is first of all, it will push Taiwan away internationally, because this is gonna create. I was an international law professor before, and this kind of zero diplomatic tie was never happened before. And if it really does happen in the near future, it will create a new abnormal example for international law, and it will also attract more attention from international community to Taiwan. It's just, which Beijing really doesn't like. it's just like when pandemic outbroke 2020, Taiwan actually attract a lot of attention because of its pandemic policy, and later on was a semiconductor. So it's number one, it will create this effect, pushing Taiwan away from China even further internationally. And number two, it will of course trigger domestic, fierce domestic discussion on what Taiwan really is, and the true meaning of being independent. And I believe that kind of discussion domestically at Taiwan is really not Beijing-like. So secondly, it will definitely trigger fierce domestic internal discussion at Taiwan, especially on our political status as a country and the true meaning of being independent. And number three, I believe it will just force Taiwan. It's just like what happened in the past 7 years, that Beijing already cut 10 Taiwan's diplomatic ties since Tsai Ing-wen took office year 2016. It will just force Taiwan to change its focal point of diplomacy. Taiwan today, DPP government today, of course, we care about the numbers of diplomatic ties, but we no longer put all our diplomatic resources or our capacities on maintaining all these diplomatic ties. Quite on the contrary, we put more and more emphasis on our political relations with like-minded countries like Japan, South Korea, and European countries. So if China really try to do that, is again forcing Taiwan to abandon traditional diplomacy and embracing more political relations with like-minded countries. Thank you.
Chungmin?
I also don't think China would do that, although probably people will say, see, Nauru was leaving Taiwan and getting to China right after the election. But as I said, it's not zero cost to get people leaving Taiwan and joining China's group. For Beijing, they also have to invest a large amount of money, effort to do that. So it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes time, it takes money, it takes everything. So, and also it will make China look pretty bad, as Professor Guo just mentioned. So I would say against the current improving US-China relations, and also Taiwan, we actually, before the election, you will see William Lai show some friendliness toward China. Well, it doesn't really matter whether or not China believe it, but the thing is, at least he did that. And after the election, so far, we were not quite clear what William Lai will decide on cross-strait relations, but at least we thought all these signals showing that the situation should be able to improve, although to the very limited extent, but at least a degree, but at least we won't expect to see an even worse situation. So based on that, but I think the case of Nauru is very interesting actually. And as we know, it will take several months, even half a year or a year to establish the formal diplomatic ties. So although people say that it's a punishment for William Lai's victory and our current government, but I didn't think so, because just in case, let's say, Hou You wins the election, does that mean Nauru's case won't happen? No. So that's pretty much like a done deal, right? When like a day after, right after the election, the Nauru made an announcement. So that won't be in the case that, okay, if Hou Yu wins the election, then Nauru says, oh my God, KMT wants it. And then Beijing say, don't do that, don't say it. So I don't think so. and I think, as everyone knows, that diplomatic interaction takes a long time. So I would say even Hou Yu wins election, Nauru may still make the announcement, but probably a week or two or a month later. So it's a done deal for sure. So I wouldn't take that as a punishment, Beijing's punishment toward William Lai or toward our government. But I would say, first, Beijing may not intentionally to do that again right now, and also plus with their slowing down economy, they might not be able to do that as well. And also, as Professor Go just mentioned, it also hurts if they really want to gain better image from Taiwanese society. So I don't think these things will happen. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We actually reach very punctual 11:01. For academics, this is spot on. This is on time. But I first of all, I mean, hope you all join me in thanking Professor Tsai and Professor Go for this fantastic, and also Quavo, of course, is not here. But I thought it was very enlightening, and I think we need this interaction because, especially in Europe, United States has a much better overview of Taiwan. But I think in Europe, we need to understand what happens in Taiwan much more. And who is better to explain that than three absolutely amazing professors? So thank you very much. And thanks to the audience, and have a fantastic day to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you
for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. 蔡老师，拜拜。
哎，郭老师，拜拜，好久不见，拜拜。